Hello and welcome to episode 230 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. My good friend Gillian will be back on the show for the second straight week today as we continue to talk about the 30th anniversary of the Disney animated classic Pocahontas. It's Gillian's favorite Disney princess movie, and we have a really fun conversation about it. I'm also going to talk a little bit about my recent visits to two patriotic travel destinations with the 4th of July coming up next week. Before we get started, my birthday is also next week. For my birthday, I just have two requests. First one, and this one is free. Go to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel and subscribe. We have way more people listening to the podcast on YouTube than subscribing. Tell some friends, and let's get a big bump on our subscriber numbers for my birthday. It just takes 30 seconds and is 100% free. If you are subscribed already, like videos and podcasts and drop some positive comments on everything you enjoy. You could even start it by just commenting "Happy Birthday" under this episode. Also, it's our last episode of Pride Month, and Alicia, Stella, and Orlando Park Stop are still doing their fundraiser for the Trevor Project. Last week, it was announced that the National Suicide Hotline for the LGBTQ+ community is being shut down by the Trump administration. The Trevor Project has a wonderful hotline to help LGBTQ+ youth. They will be even more in demand now. For my birthday, I ask that you donate to her fundraiser, give.thetrevorproject.org/parkstop. That's give.thetrevorproject.org/parkstop. Every little thing counts. Alicia Stella already crossed the $25,000 mark on the 16th. It will be amazing to hear the final number at the end of the month. So I wanted to talk about two really inspiring trips my wife Courtney and I took over the past few weeks. We've moved back to the Northeast, so we're hitting some travel destinations we haven't visited in a long time. First, we checked out Gettysburg. The vlog of this trip is already up on the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. So much of the Gettysburg travel experience is centered around the Civil War battlefield, but we started in the center of town. As a history nerd, I loved all of the stores with actual artifacts from the Civil War. They served almost as museums as well as antique stores. There were also so many great history bookstores. I could have walked through them for hours. My favorite little store, of course, was A Little Irish Too. The store had a mixture of Civil War-themed Irish merchandise. I got the battle flag of New York's 69th Regiment, which was a regiment of Irish Americans and Irish immigrants. I also got a shirt commemorating the brigade. The store also had imported products from Ireland. My wife Courtney was able to get some chocolates. I was able to pick up a few bags of potatoes, and they had sweaters, hats, and jewelry. The woman behind the counter knew a lot of the history behind the Irish in Gettysburg and also referred us to people who would have even more information. Some of the historical places we hit in town included the train station where President Lincoln arrived the day before giving the Gettysburg Address, and at the Wills House where he stayed the night before giving the speech. There's a statue outside the Wills House where Lincoln is holding up his top hat to point at the room where he slept. As a tall guy myself, I was impressed by the door frames. President Lincoln probably didn't see many door frames in 1863 where he didn't have to duck to enter the building. David Wills not only allowed President Lincoln to stay at his house before the dedication of the National Cemetery, where many of the dead from Gettysburg were buried, but he also donated the land to make the cemetery. St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church served as a hospital for wounded soldiers during the battle, and we visited there. We also got to see the statue of Thaddeus Stevens and location of his old home in Gettysburg. Stevens would later move to Lancaster, where he ran for the U.S. House of Representatives. He was the leader of the Radical Republicans who opposed slavery, fought for the 13th and 14th Amendments, back when Republicans liked the 14th Amendment, took part in the Underground Railroad, and fought for a real reconstruction that would have forced the southern states to make more concessions before being readmitted into the Union. There's also a statue outside the library dedicated specifically to the Gettysburg Address. As anyone who has seen the Hall of Presidents in Magic Kingdom knows, the Gettysburg Address was only a little over 2 minutes. The keynote speaker at the cemetery dedication spoke for almost 3 hours, and Lincoln didn't even speak for 3 minutes, but it was Lincoln's words that carried the day. Finally, we caught the church where Lincoln attended a service the morning of the address, and President Eisenhower attended after his presidency. We ate at the amazing Irish pub Glen Owen. We finally made it out to the battlefield to see the Eternal Light Peace Memorial, which was dedicated by President Franklin Roosevelt for the 75th anniversary of the fighting. It was the last ever public gathering of Civil War veterans. We wrapped it up by seeing the memorial for the Irish Brigades and some random other memorials. You can visit Gettysburg a million times and still not see everything. It just goes to show the immense sacrifice that was made by so many. With everything going on in this country right now, it is inspiring to see a place where brave men and women fought against the most despicable type of evil and won. The following week, we went to the Independence Hall area of Philadelphia. This was much more interesting than I expected. We didn't have a reservation to see Independence Hall, but a park ranger had a few cancellations for her sold-out tour and invited us to join. It was awe-inspiring to see the actual room where the Declaration of Independence was signed, to think about John Adams making impassioned pleas for separation from England, or just fighting about the grammar of the word inalienable with Thomas Jefferson was exciting for me. To look at a chair and imagine Benjamin Franklin napping or George Washington being named the commander-in-chief of the colonial forces was inspirational. The tour guide was also engaging. We later saw the room that served as Congress for a decade. It was in that room where the first peaceful transfer of power happened under the U.S. Constitution, when President Washington made way for incoming President John Adams. That string of peaceful transfer of power has gone almost unbroken in our country's history, with the exceptions of 1861 and 2021. We also saw the house where Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, and the shell of the house where the president lived when Philadelphia was the center of the federal government. We caught Old St. Mary's Church, which is where French and Spanish diplomats went to Catholic Mass with many representatives from the newly formed United States after the British surrendered. Of course, those Catholic countries served as allies to the colonies in the war, but Philadelphia was at one time the only place in the British Empire where a Catholic Mass could be said in public. It was a testament to the newfound freedom of religion for the young nation. A few blocks away, we saw the Korean War Memorial, Scottish Immigration Monument, and the Irish Famine Memorial. A 2-part vlog from that day will be going up on the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel on my birthday, June 30th, and on July 1st. Now let's welcome my good friend Gillian back to the show. Thanks for being here, G.
No problem. Hi.
In retrospect, this is another thing that aged very poorly about the movie. But at the time, Mel Gibson was a get.
Yes. Big deal. And unfortunately, one of my biggest girlhood crushes. And this movie probably solidified that and is why I became such a huge fan of his afterward. But yeah, honestly, this was it. It was this movie. When I found out he was John Smith and he was a good-looking guy and John Smith was a good-looking guy, and once again, I told you I was a hormonal teenager. I just he became one of my biggest crushes, Hollywood crushes, and yes, that has not aged well at all.
But it should have been something that at the time you would have thought would have helped this movie. Now, I know that a lot of the other famous people that got tapped for Disney Renaissance movies, you know, you're talking about having Robin Williams as the genie. You're talking about Eddie Murphy as Mushu. I think they tried to get comedians to play the second tier characters, and Mel Gibson is a lot of things. A comedian, he is not. So I
He
think
is
that
though. He is though. You gotta
okay.
watch the Lethal Weapons and those movies. He's hilarious. He's a sorry. He's a smart aleck, and he's very good. He's very good at comedy. I imagine you probably haven't seen very much of it, but that's another conversation for another time.
He's good at
But
comedy, but he's not required to do that in this role. Like it was a different celebrity get than
yeah,
the previous
yes,
Renaissance movies. So they kind of went away from the formula a little bit. I mean, they really did go away from the formula because in this one, the sidekicks don't talk.
yeah, yeah.
And it's animals. And that is something that is very, very different from a lot of the other Disney, especially Renaissance movies.
Yeah.
What do
That
you think? And I'm just going to ask, and it's fine if you like it. This was a plot device that I thought was just absurd. Just making them understand each other for no other reason than they had to figure it out to make it easier to make the movie an hour and 21 minutes.
listen with your heart and you will understand. That's the whole part of the whimsical spiritual earth, spirits that are with Pocahontas and her side of this movie. I get it. I mean, I totally get it. I understand that a 40-something-year-old man just seeing it for the first time wouldn't be able to immediately resonate with it. But that's the whole point. Grandmother Willow tells her that in the very beginning when she's trying to tell her about her dream. You listen with your heart and you will understand. And that's the symbolism behind that. That's what happened when he chased her down in the canoe and took her hand. She listened. They both listened with their heart, and they understood.
Okay. And listen, that's a good point. Like the movie was not made for me. It was made for you and people around your age at that time. So that is a good point. But yes, 30 years later, having that be a major plot point is definitely something that was like, oh, okay, sure, that's how they're
Never.
going to do this.
I've just never seen it as a major plot point, though. I just like they did it and they moved on, and the movie just moved on. I never thought of it that way. But yeah,
Right.
that's why I'm talking to you, because I'm getting your viewpoints on this from someone who hasn't seen it. So that's what I'm most excited about.
And sometimes the answer to a question has to be because the movie had to happen. Like sometimes you just can't do the movie if something doesn't happen, so you have to have the thing happen. And that's okay. Like I'm not one of those people who's a real stickler for it. It just struck me as odd for a second and then I moved on from it.
Well, once again, it's what the suspension of belief, because this is a Disney movie.
So the other thing that I think has aged poorly, but kind of put me down a rabbit hole a little bit, was we have the gay coded villain, which is something
Happy Pride, yes.
which is something that is a tied and true Disney thing. They love the gay coded villain.
Mm-hmm.
But what was remarkable about this movie is David Ogden Stiers plays two different gay coded villains.
Yes, yes. I kind of, it's like, do people know that? Like, I wonder if many people actually know that, because of course it's something I would know right out of the gate because I knew everything about this movie from the second I saw it. But like, I wonder how many people don't know that's the same guy playing both parts.
He voiced both Governor Radcliffe and whatever the name is of Radcliffe's like second in command or whatever, his little
Oh my
assistant.
God, I literally have the movie on in front of me right now, and I watched it last night, and I'm drawing a complete blank. Wiggins.
Which, first of all, leads to some very questionable things about Governor Radcliffe. Why he, as such a gay coded character, has this assistant who like follows him around like a little puppy dog who also is so incredibly gay coded. I am worried that he is abusing his power in that relationship. But second of all, this did lead me down a little bit of a rabbit hole because obviously David Ogden Stiers is in my favorite bit of media in the
Yep,
history of time, and
yep,
he is Charles Emerson Winchester in MASH.
yep.
So I obviously knew him from MASH. He was in Beauty and the Beast. He's been
Hogsworth.
in, yeah, he's been in Lilo and Stitch. He was one of the aliens in Lilo and Stitch. But at one point later in his career, he did a guest spot on Frasier. And the premise of the Frasier episode was that he had worked with Niles and Frasier's mother. And the joke of the episode was that Martin, Frasier and Niles' father, started to wonder if they had an
Oh,
affair because he was so much like Frasier and Niles, and of course, Martin wasn't like them.
I
So
remember
the
this.
episode ends, spoiler alert, that he says that they were very close and that she was the only one of the only people he could trust to tell that he was gay. And then, of course, that's sort of the joke. And then Martin is like, "Oh, these are my boys," and that, yeah, like, so that's how that sitcom episode ended. But then I wanted to research. I'm like, I don't really know a lot about this guy, even though he was on my favorite television show. He didn't come out of the closet as being gay until something like 2009. And he was worried that he was getting so much work from Disney and he didn't know how Disney would take it
Oh,
if he came out of the closet. But at some point, he said that to his significant other, it was just too insulting that he not say that they were a couple publicly, that he was willing to risk his career. So that was a story that I thought was really, really interesting because he had played, I don't know if you would say Winchester on MASH was gay coded, but there was some of that there.
yeah,
um,
no. Why, that's anything David Ogden Stiers ever did.
right, except for he was in the one of those like John Hughes or one of those 80s movies. He played a dad, like Better Off Dead or something like
Oh,
that.
yes, that's right. I do. I remember that. I love that movie. Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that he was that concerned about that. And I like, listen, like this is airing in Pride Month. And I'm not saying anybody ever has to come out of the closet before they're ready. Obviously, that's not the case. And it was a whole different world even back in 2009. But I'm still kind of surprised that I just didn't know that whole story until I watched this movie where the gay coding was just so over the top.
See, now you learn so much from this movie. You not only learn the history, you learn more about your favorite people that you already learned so much about. Like this movie, it brings everyone together. That's what, talking about the history, that's what made me research every bit of history to find out what was wrong and what was right. You know, what really happened and what didn't happen. It was watching this movie, and now I want to learn about these real people, which, to their credit, at least Disney got that out of that awful telling of history. But yeah, I mean this is how our favorite things, help us learn.
And I was shocked to learn that Christian Bale was in this movie.
Yep, I knew who he was before anybody because I had researched, done dossiers on every single cast member in this movie. I had to know who everybody was, and nobody knew who he was back then. Nobody. I have a poster. I have a signed poster from the entire cast with his signature on it. No one knew who he was then when he signed it.
So this was literally before he was famous at all.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I think he was in Newsies or something. Wasn't he in that Newsies movie that everyone talks? Newsboys movie that everyone talks about? I think he was in that. I could be wrong.
So what are some other things that you think people should know about this movie if it is sort of lost in the shuffle for them? Make the case why they should go back on Disney Plus and give it a watch.
Regardless of what you hear about the history, because that's always going to be this movie's biggest fault. And of course, once again, rightfully so, Disney got that very wrong. But this is a classic Disney movie in every sense. In every sense. The sidekicks, they have their bits, they have their little side plots. The music, the art. This movie is a beautiful masterpiece inside and out. Every bit from beginning to end, just from the art, the animation, the colors, the painting, and the music, the score. Not just the songs that Pocahontas sings. The score, the orchestra throughout the entire movie. It's all a beautiful, beautiful work of art. If you can just put that aside for the history thing for a minute and just imagine it as any other story. This is a classic Disney movie from start to finish.
So do you really blame the historical aspect of this for it not being as popular? Do you think that was the primary reason that this didn't succeed at the level of the other Disney Renaissance films?
Because if you look it up financially, it was a blow it out of the water success like any other Disney movie. Financially, this movie made some bucks. I remember it being a footnote in one of my ex-husband's economics textbooks from college, and that was 20 years ago. But it was an actual footnote that he showed me one day that said that this was one of the top 3 grossing movies of all time, Disney movies of all time. That was in his college textbook. So this movie, it did the numbers financially. People went out and saw it, but it's just the backlash that it got. And again, rightfully so, as 2 white people talking about these issues. Rightfully so. Like, I think it was an affront to Pocahontas' entire lineage. It wasn't a good decision.
So now here's a question for you, Gillian, that I wonder if we could say definitively that Pocahontas and some of its failures, at least PR-wise, may have led to the successes of The Princess and the Frog and Moana and some of these other movies where maybe Disney was forced to say, hey, we got to get more of this stuff right, because it does matter in the long run. We can't just take a culture and just completely pull out everything we want and not dig a little deeper into it. So then by the time you did have a princess of color like Princess Tiana, or you have Polynesian culture in the Moana movies, that Disney knew that they had to sit down and do their research, because if they didn't do it the right way, it was going to end up being a problem and they weren't going to be able to use the intellectual property the way they wanted.
You're right. You have a point, but I think you are forgetting something. Mulan was a real person. That was a real story, a real thing that happened, a legend in China. And that movie, I think with that movie, they had already learned not to make the missteps that they did with Pocahontas, because that movie doesn't nearly get as much as the same like shots taken at it as Pocahontas does.
Yeah, I will agree with you that they did a better job in those areas on Mulan. They definitely did their research on it to an extent. They do mix some cultures in there, some Japanese and
Mm-hmm.
Chinese. There's that old King of the Hill. What are you, Chinese or Japanese? They kind of do a little bit of mixing cultures in there, but I think overall they do a better job with telling a story of somebody who was at least a real legend. Like, I know we know that Mulan was a real person, but we don't know her exact story, as it has been a long, long time, at least not as much as we know the story of the real Pocahontas. But they did a better job there. And then I think that over the years, they continued to learn their lesson in that. So hopefully they will just continue to improve. And maybe now that we're at 30 years and we can look back at some other things from our past and we can say, okay, this thing's not perfect, but let's pull out the things that are good and just go, okay, well, that's not, and learn from it.
Even I would say this story still very much resonates with the political climate that we're in now too for Pocahontas. Just if you look at the lyrics from Savages towards the end when they're about to go to war, this movie still hits with like today's themes, with what we're going through as a country.
Yeah, I can see that. Now, then again, I do think when they're doing Savages and the natives are talking about the English, I'm like, well, they're making a much better point.
Of course.
I feel like there was a little bit of, well, both sides hated each other for no reason. And I'm like, the natives had a reason.
No, yeah, no. I see what you're saying, but I never felt that way with as long as I've lived with this movie. I was always very much was like, no, the white men are wrong.
Right. And watching it 30 years later for the first time, you see everything in a different light than you did if you saw it right when that was coming out. Another thing I was thinking about is that this came out in June of 1995.
Mm-hmm.
This movie about conflict between races came out the same month as the bloody glove didn't fit in the O.J. Simpson trial.
Oh my god. Yeah. See, yeah.
That's crazy to me that these two things, every once in a while, I love to look at old newspapers and see the front page and see like two seemingly unrelated history events that were happening at the same time. And while I was watching this, I was thinking about how this was going on at the same time as the O.J. Simpson trial. And that's bonkers because, like you said, when you talk about political climates, I don't think there was a time in recent history where we were as divided as we are now as we were in June of 1995. So
Yeah.
I thought that was another funny little twist to this.
Yeah.
We
All the
only
themes are
have
there.
a couple more minutes left. I want to talk to you about Pocahontas's, not her love interest, that was John Smith, but the one everybody wanted to be her love interest.
Everybody.
Well, not everybody, not you. But it seemed like you are not a fan of this character, so I want to let you get that off your chest.
Well, we're not a fan of this character because we weren't supposed to be a fan of this character. Like, there's nothing wrong with him. He didn't do anything wrong, really, other than attack them when they were kissing. But it's just, yeah, it's the guy her dad wanted her to be with. Grandmother Willow didn't want her to be with him. Nakoma wanted him for herself, which that's fine. Nakoma could have had him. But they were a mismatch. He would have never stood for her. She's a free spirit, and he would have never stood for it. That's what they were trying to tamp down the whole movie. The both of them, like, you got to stop running around and being crazy. You got to settle down. Be a good woman or a good wife. That's what they were trying to do. She didn't want to be tied down by a serious guy like him. He was too serious, and yeah, so that's how I felt. I don't. It doesn't mean I wanted him to die, but but I just didn't want them to end up together.
Oh yeah, and that's actually another, like, that was harsh
Yeah.
in a Disney movie at the time. We also recently talked about how it's the 35th anniversary of Dick Tracy, and we were talking about all the violence in that movie, and this one, for being a Disney animated film 30 years ago, I mean, you can't do it without all the guns, but to have somebody actually shot and killed in this thing.
Yeah, but I feel like that's never happened before in a Disney movie.
It may.
I mean, I'm just thinking, like, Gaston falls off the cliff to his death, and that guy hangs himself in Tarzan, and just, like, there are a lot of grisly deaths, usually to the villains. I get it, but yeah, they definitely took, along with the history, some liberties with, I guess, venturing outside of their normal formula.
Yeah, I thought it was a little darker than a lot of the Disney movies. And when Beast throws Gaston off the thing, and you're just like, yeah. And I can understand you not wanting Pocahontas to end up with him, but that doesn't mean the dude should die.
Well, also that was to further drive the plot point of the things between the tribe and the settlers to come to a head. I mean, they had to push it some way. So that's, I guess, what they had to do. That I don't know what else they could have had to have been an act of violence of some kind to really. I mean, one of the tribe already got shot earlier in the movie, and then you never see what happened to him. I thought of that for the first time last night. I was like, we never see it. Oh yeah, I think we see him on crutches at the end of the movie. Sorry, talking to myself. But yeah, I think honestly, there's like no kids in this movie. It's all very much adults and more adult themes, I feel like. And I guess that was them trying to keep to the history of it again, loosely.
All right, Gillian, I think that is where we will end it. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This has been episode 230 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. I will be back next Thursday to do another 4th of July themed episode. I'll go through my 10 favorite cities to visit in the United States and tell you what I love about them so much. My judgment is based on 8 cross-country driving trips across different parts of the nation. I've seen an awful lot of this country, and I think I can pinpoint some really great spots to spend a day or a few days. That will be next week on Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Until then, have a great week.